It's about to get interesting, so subscribe and hit like so you don't miss the top content.
I sit on the edge of the bed, staring into the void in front of me. My hands are shaking, though I try to ball them into fists to stop the weakness. It's dark outside the window, only the faint light of a street lamp shining through the curtains, casting long shadows on the wall. I can hear the clock in the living room ticking, its sound louder than usual, as if it's purposely reminding me of every lost moment. Tonight stretches on endlessly, and I know she won't be back until morning. She said she loves me. She said she loves our children. But now she's with him. We live in a small town somewhere in the Midwest. Quiet streets, cozy houses, neighbors who always smile and wave as they drive by. It seems like nothing ever seems to happen here, that life flows slowly and predictably. But today, that predictability has been shattered. I can't understand how things got to this point. We were happy. At least I thought we were. We were raising 2 kids, making plans for the future, dreaming of going to the coast when the kids were older. But something went wrong. Or maybe that something was always there, and I just didn't want to notice. She left tonight, saying she had to meet a friend. I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She'd always been open, honest, at least I thought so. But then I found her cell phone. It was on the kitchen table. She'd forgotten it when she left in a hurry. I didn't want to look. I really didn't want to. But something inside me snapped, and I couldn't help myself. The messages, the pictures, everything I never wanted to see. Her with him. She's laughing, smiling, looking at him like he's her world. And me? I'm just a backdrop, part of a landscape she stopped noticing a long time ago. I don't know what to do. The children are asleep in their rooms, their breathing even and quiet. They have no idea their world is falling apart. I can't tell them that. I can't destroy their innocence, their belief that their parents love each other. But how can I go on living with this? How can I look her in the eye tomorrow when she comes back knowing she spent the night with someone else? I get up and start pacing around the room. My footsteps echo in the silence. I can feel the anger and pain fighting inside me, but I can't let it come out. I have to be strong. For the children. For myself. But how can you be strong when everything you believed in turns out to be a lie? I walk to the window and pull back the curtain. The street is empty. No cars, no people, just silence and darkness. I look up at the stars, which are barely visible because of the city lights, and think about how things have changed. We used to look at the stars together. Once she used to say, I was her universe. Now, I'm just a lonely man standing at the window, trying to figure out how to move on with my life. I walk back to the bed and sit down. My thoughts are jumbled, and I can't focus. I think about what I'm going to tell her tomorrow. Should I scream? Cry? Be silent? Or just pretend it didn't happen? But I can't. I can't live this lie. I don't want to be the one who turns a blind eye to the truth, even if that truth destroys everything we have. I hear a car drive by somewhere in the distance. The sound fades away, and then it's silent again. I close my eyes and try to imagine that tomorrow everything will be as it was before. But I know it's impossible. Nothing will ever be the same again. Never. Morning came, but I didn't sleep. I spent the whole night in this room, going over scraps of memories in my head, as if trying to find an answer in them. But there was no answer. Only pain, which grew sharper by the hour. I could hear the children awake, their voices coming from their rooms. They were laughing, arguing over something, as they always did. Their world was untouched, and I had to keep it that way, at least for a while. I went into the kitchen to make breakfast. Automatically, I poured the coffee, put the skillet on the stove, cracked the eggs. My hands did their own work, and my head was somewhere far away. I heard the kids come into the kitchen, sit down at the table. They said something to me, but I barely reacted. My thoughts were fixed on the door, behind which she would appear at any moment. And then she came. I heard the key turn in the lock, the door open. She came in, and I felt the air in the room grow heavier. She looked tired, but there was something in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before. Some strange calmness, almost indifference. She said, "Hello," to the children, kissed them, and then looked at me. Her gaze was blank, like she was looking through me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask how she could. I wanted to spew out all the pain that had been building up inside me all night, but I couldn't. Instead, I just nodded and told her breakfast was ready. She sat down at the table, and we started eating. The kids chatted about school and their plans for the day, and I sat and watched her. She ate as if nothing had happened. Like this night was just a normal night. After breakfast, she said she was going to go take a shower. I stayed with the kids, helping them get ready for school. They left, and the house was empty again. I heard the water in the shower stop running, and a few minutes later, she came out in her robe, with wet hair. She sat across from me at the table, and we looked at each other. The silence was so loud I could barely stand it. "You know," she said finally. Her voice was quiet, but every word hit me like a hammer. "I didn't mean for things to turn out this way, but I can't pretend anymore." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My chest constricted so tight I could barely breathe. She continued, "I love you, and I love our children, but I can't live this life anymore. I can't be the person you want me to be. I'm tired." Her words sounded like a sentence. I felt the ground slipping from under my feet. I wanted to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. She stood up and walked to the window, looking outside. "I don't know how to explain it," she said, "but I feel like I'm suffocating here. I need something else. I need to be myself, and I can't do that here." I looked at her, and suddenly I realized I don't know her. I don't know who she really is. All these years we'd lived together, raised kids, made plans, but I'd never noticed that she was losing herself. Or maybe I just didn't want to notice. "What now?" I finally asked. My voice sounded foreign, hoarse. She turned to me, and there was sadness in her eyes. "I don't know," she said, "but I can't go on like this. I don't want to lie to you. And to myself." I nodded. What else could I do? I could feel the walls around me crumbling, the world I knew disappearing. But I couldn't be angry with her. I couldn't hate her. Because there was a truth in her words that I didn't want to see. We were both trapped, and she just found the strength to admit it. "I don't want to destroy our family," she said, "but I can't keep pretending that everything is okay." I nodded again. I understood her. But that didn't make the pain any less. I could feel the tears coming to my eyes, but I didn't let them come out. I had to be strong. For the kids, for myself, even for her. "Let's think of a way to be," I said finally. "For the children. For us." She looked at me, and there was gratitude in her eyes. She nodded, and we sat down at the table to talk. About the future. About how we were going to get on with our lives. But deep down, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. And maybe it was for the best. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. We no longer slept in the same room. She moved into the guest bedroom, and though we continued to live under the same roof, an invisible wall grew between us. We became two people sharing a house, Children and memories, but nothing else. The children seemed to sense that something was wrong, but they didn't ask. Maybe they were afraid to hear the answer. Or maybe they just didn't want to destroy the fragile world we had created for them. We tried to be normal for them. We ate dinner together, went to school events, smiled when we needed to. But behind those smiles was an emptiness. We didn't really talk anymore. Our conversations were reduced to discussing everyday matters. Who would pick up the children from school? What to buy at the store? When to pay the bills? Everything else remained beyond our words. I began to notice her changing. She started leaving the house more often, spending time with friends I hardly knew. Sometimes she would come home late, and I could hear her quietly closing the door so as not to wake anyone. I didn't ask where she'd been. I was afraid to hear the answer. Afraid she would tell me a truth I wasn't ready to accept. One night, when the kids were already asleep, she came up to me. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, watching some movie I couldn't even remember. She sat down across from me and looked into my eyes. Her gaze was serious, and I realized that something important was about to happen. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was calm, but there was determination in it. I turned off the TV and nodded. My heart started beating faster, though I tried to keep an outwardly calm demeanor. "I think we should break up," she said. "For real. We can't go on like this. It's not right. For us. For the kids." I knew it would happen sooner or later, but that didn't make it any easier. I felt a lump come up in my throat, but I swallowed it and nodded. "I understand," I said. "You're right. We can't go on." She looked at me with relief, as if she was afraid I would start arguing, yelling, begging her to stay. But I didn't. I realized it didn't make sense anymore. We both knew our marriage was over. All we had to do was admit it out loud. "I want us to stay friends," she said. "For the children's sake. They shouldn't have to suffer because of us." I nodded. I wanted that too. But I wasn't sure if I could be her friend. Whether I could look at her knowing she wasn't mine anymore. Knowing that she was with someone else. "We'll find a way," I said. "For the kids." She smiled, but there was no joy in her smile. Only sadness and regret. We sat in silence, each of us absorbed in our own thoughts. I thought about how things had changed, how we had gone from two people who once loved each other to strangers, how we'd lost ourselves in this marriage, in this life we'd built ourselves. "I'm going to start looking for an apartment," she said. "I think it's best if I move out. The kids will stay with you. They're used to this house." I nodded. I couldn't imagine her leaving this house where we'd lived for so many years. But I knew it was necessary. We couldn't keep living together, pretending that everything was okay. "Okay," I said. "Let's make this as easy as possible. For them." She stood up and walked over to me. For a moment, I thought she was going to hug me like she had before. But she just put her hand on my shoulder and squeezed it lightly. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say. She went to her room, and I stayed sitting on the couch, staring into the void. I felt the tears finally bursting out, but I didn't hold them back. I cried. I cried for us, for our children, for the life we had lost. I woke up the next morning with a heaviness in my chest, but with a new realization. We were no longer husband and wife, but we were still parents, and I had to be strong. For them, for myself, even for her. I walked out into the kitchen where the kids were already eating breakfast. They were laughing, arguing, as they always did. Their world was untouched, and I had to keep it that way. I sat down at the table, smiled at them, and started the day. A new day, a new life. It's been a few months since she left. She found an apartment close to our house so that the children could move easily between us. We tried to make everything as comfortable for them as possible, and I think we succeeded. They have adapted to the new reality better than I expected. The children are amazingly resilient, as they say here in America. They kept smiling, laughing, living their lives, and that gave me the strength to move forward. But one evening, as I sat on the porch of our house with a cup of coffee, I realized that I still didn't know the whole truth. I didn't know why she left. I didn't know what exactly broke us. And I may never know. But in that moment, I realized it didn't matter anymore. The truth won't change what happened. It won't bring us back. I looked up and saw a car driving slowly down the street. It stopped in front of our house, and she got out. She looked different. Freer, more confident. She walked over to me and sat down on the step next to me. "Hi," she said. "May I?" I nodded. We sat in silence, listening to the evening wind rustling the leaves on the trees. Then she spoke. "I wanted to tell you something," she began. "I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I couldn't find the right words. But now I realize that you deserve to know the truth." I felt my heart sink. I wasn't ready for this, but I nodded, letting her know I was listening. "I didn't leave you," she said. "I left me, the woman I had become. I lost myself in this marriage, in this life. I stopped recognizing myself in the mirror, and I realized that if I stayed, I would disappear completely." I looked at her, trying to understand. She continued, "I didn't want to hurt you, and the children, but I couldn't pretend anymore. I couldn't be the person you wanted me to be. I couldn't be the perfect wife, the perfect mother. I just couldn't." Her voice shook, but she spoke firmly. I could see how hard it was for her, but she continued, "I met him, and he showed me that I could be different, that I could be me. But it wasn't about him. It was about me finding myself. And I know that sounds selfish, but I had to do it. For me. For us." I didn't say anything. Her words sounded like a revelation, but they didn't bring relief, only understanding. I realized she hadn't left me. She had walked away from the life that was suffocating her, and maybe I was part of that life too. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness," she said, "because I know it won't change anything. But I want you to know that I will always be grateful to you. For everything we had. For our children. For the years we spent together." I nodded. I didn't know what to say. My feelings were too complicated, too confusing. But I realized it was pointless to be angry with her. She had done what she had to do. For herself. For us. "Thank you," I finally said. "For the truth." She smiled. And there was sadness in her smile, but also relief. She stood up and looked at me. "We'll be fine," she said. "For the children. For us." I nodded. She turned and walked to her car. I watched her drive away and felt something inside me let go. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know that we'll make it through. We have to. I stayed sitting on the porch, looking up at the stars. They were the same as they always were. But I felt like I was looking at them differently, as if for the first time. And in that moment, I realized that life goes on. And maybe that's the most important thing.